1992. 22-year-old Corey Wieneke lived in West Liberty, Iowa, a farming community of about 40,000 people in the county, and a place where it is said everybody knew everybody. Growing up, Corey was incredibly athletic and popular. He was always surrounded by friends, and is described as outgoing, friendly, and energetic. At 16 years old, Corey worked doing odd jobs at his grandparents' busy bar called Wink's Tap. It wasn't until he turned 18 that he became a bartender there, and spent most of his nights working. Wink's became Corey's second home, and he, almost like a mascot for the venue. People described his presence there as very entertaining. He was charming, smooth and jovial. Locals came to look forward to frequenting Wink's just to engage with Corey. When he was at school, he played on the football team, and he met a cheerleader by the name of Jody Hotz. They quickly fell in love with one another and began a serious relationship. The young man moves into an apartment above the bar that he works at, and Jody moves in with him. Although Corey was in a relationship, he had a reputation of infidelity. Many of his friends describe Corey as, quote, a ladies' man, and his sexual exploits were frequently discussed by the community. A friend of Corey's talks about this in an interview and says, his love for women caused quite the talk around town. He just loved fooling around with them. He was like a magnet for ladies. They were all drawn toward him, and he saw so many. Single women, women with children, women from other towns. The list goes on and on. Jody knew about his behavior, and she wasn't by any means happy with it, but it is said that she loved him deeply, and she accepted this side of him to make a relationship work. By 1992, the two 22-year-olds had moved into a farmhouse owned by Jody's parents, and here Corey would work nights at the bar, whilst Jody worked days at a bank. This schedule would see them spending less and less time together, but despite this, Corey would ask her to marry him. In fall of that year, she became his fiancée. At this point in time, one of the women Corey had been fooling around frequently with was a 29-year-old lady by the name of Annette Cahill. Annette had married and divorced at a young age, having 2 children with that man. When they split, she moved her kids and herself into a West Liberty house owned by her brother and his wife. It is here that they all lived together. When Annette first met Corey, he was 16 years old and she was 23. She says that the two messed around for years, but they never had sex. They would only make out in vehicles here and there. It wasn't until 3 years later that their relationship properly turned sexual. In the months leading up to October of 1992, Corey and Annette were having sex up to 5 times a week. She worked day shifts at the bar with Corey and claims that they would do it every chance they got. In their cars, at her brother's house, in the apartment above the bar, and in the bar itself. In addition to having sex, a big part of their relationship was alcohol and cocaine use. Annette says that by October of 1992, her and Corey had made plans to skip town together. He had told her that he was done with Jody and wanted to run away to Branson, Missouri with her. Here they would purchase a bar and manage it together. Annette says that although she wasn't too interested in running a bar, she loved Corey so much and really wanted to start a life with him that this was something she was really looking forward to. Around the same time that Corey was having an affair with Annette, there was another woman in the picture, a 20-year-old lady by the name of Wendy Marshall, someone he had known for many years, and someone that he even fathered a child with in July of 1992. Wendy would say that she too loved Corey and hoped to have a future with him. These two women, Annette and Wendy, knew of each other and had heard rumors that he was fooling around with both of them at the same time, and a possible fourth lady as well, but they didn't have hard proof that it was happening. This brings us to the date, October 12th, 1992. Annette was working the day shift at Wink's, and Corey was working the night. When Annette finished up, she stayed at the bar and proceeded to drink heavily whilst she waited for Corey to finish. At 2 a.m., Corey is scheduled to wrap up work, and as he's closing the bar, Annette gets into the front passenger seat of his vehicle and waits for him there. Their plan to run away together to Branson, Annette states, was meant to happen the following weekend, so she was very excited to see him on this night. Shortly after 2 a.m., Corey arrives at the car, but he's not alone. Wendy Marshall is with him. Corey and Wendy get into the car with Annette sitting in the front passenger seat, and they all begin driving away. Annette is frustrated that Wendy is there, and attempts to exit the vehicle as it's moving, prompting Corey to pull over. When she gets out of the car, Corey follows her out, and a heated argument between them occurs. Annette angrily yells, "Fuck you, I'm going to walk home," then proceeds to give him an ultimatum. Right then and there, he has to make up his mind. Did he want to run away with her, or is it over? Throughout this argument, she says that her world flipped upside down by how Corey responded. He told her that he loved her, and this was impactful because he had never said that to her before. At first, she didn't believe him and retorts, "You don't love me. I'm nothing to you." But he firmly states, "You're not nothing to me. I love you." Annette calms down and gets back into the car. The plan now is to drop Wendy off at her vehicle so that she can drive herself home, and then Corey would drive Annette back to her place. As they're driving, Corey tells Wendy that after he takes Annette home, he'll come back to meet her. This was said in Annette's presence, and upon hearing it, Annette is angered once more, but another argument does not occur. Instead, after Wendy is dropped at her vehicle, Annette and Corey go back to her home. They go inside, and using Annette's words, they have angry sex. When this is over, Corey leaves and drives to Wendy's house. He stays there until around 6 a.m., then leaves to drive home. When he gets home, he climbs into bed with his sleeping fiancée and falls asleep around 7 in the morning. Jody wakes up for work and leaves the house at around 8 a.m., and she recalls that when leaving, Corey was still asleep in bed. On this morning, at around 8:30 a.m., Annette is doing roofing work with a friend when her brother's wife, Jackie Hazen, arrives at the job site. Jackie and Annette had become close friends since living together, and Annette gets into the car, then the two drive away together. They were going to go to Iowa City, about half an hour's drive away, to do some shopping and attend a doctor's appointment for Jackie. But before they leave the area, Annette wants to drop a letter off to Corey. They arrive at his house around 9 a.m. Annette knocks on the door, but no one answers. They wait a few minutes, then decide to leave. A local farmer drives by as this is happening and catches a glimpse of an unknown vehicle at Corey's place. He also sees two people standing around outside of the house. Although he doesn't identify who they were, it is believed that this was Jackie and Annette. It's at this point that the two women depart for Iowa City, and they spend most of their day there. Jackie has multiple receipts from retail stores, a typewriter shop, food outlets, and the doctor's office to prove that she was there. The last receipt having the timestamp of 1:45 p.m. 6:30 p.m. now. Corey's fiancée, Jody, has finished work and returns home. When she gets to her house, she says that things were out of place. Something is not right. Their dog was outside unchained, which never would happen, and their front door had been left unlocked. Also, Corey's car was still there, and she was expecting him to be at work by that time. Jody enters the house and finds a grisly scene. I've blurred the images that are coming up, but a warning in advance that even still, they are quite distressing. I'll let you know when they are no longer up on screen. Corey, still in his underwear, was laying face down and lifeless on the bedroom carpeted floor. His legs wrapped in the blankets like he had fallen out of bed. He was bloodied and beaten, and there was blood on the wall and floor. Jody, distressed and in shock, calls 911.
Hi, I need somebody to come out to my house. I think my fiance is dead. Why do you think he might be dead? Because he's all bloody and he's not breathing and he's cold. Has he shot himself or anything? I don't think so. I haven't looked around. There's nothing there. Okay, Jody, I'm going to put you on hold so I can get the people going, okay? Okay. Oh, my God.
When police arrive on scene, they notice that the house wasn't trashed and nothing had been taken. In addition, the beating that Corey had sustained, law enforcement say that this was a crime of passion. Someone was very, very angry with Corey to have done this. A forensic pathologist indicates that there were 13 separate blunt force injuries on Corey. Injuries sustained with something like a metal pipe or bat. 4 of the wounds were to his head, and the fatal blow was on the back of his head, leaving his skull split wide open with a large H-shaped laceration. The section of this video that shows images of Corey's injuries is now over. About half a mile down the road, an aluminium baseball bat is recovered with blood all over it. It's sent off for testing, and although no fingerprints or DNA of the suspect are revealed, it is confirmed to be Corey's blood. The farmer who initially spotted the baseball bat says that he often drives this road slowly to inspect his crops, and earlier that day when he drove by at 9 a.m., the same time he saw the strange vehicle at Corey's house, he didn't see the bat there, but at 1:30 p.m. when he came back, it was laying on the side of the road. Police used this information to place the time of murder somewhere between 9 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. An investigation commences, and there are multiple suspects. Jody is initially looked into. A short police interview is conducted, where she is said to have been beside herself and barely coherent. She is ruled out as a suspect because she has a rock-solid alibi, with multiple people confirming that she was at work all day. Her friends are interviewed to ask them about Jody's knowledge of the affairs Corey was having, and her friends say that yes, she was aware, and she was not happy about it, but she was so in love with him and committed to making the relationship work that she would have never left him, let alone done something like this. She is quickly cleared as to having any involvement with the crime. Jody is said to have been severely grief-stricken, and having no family in town, she leaves days later to move far away to live closer to her family. There is gossip that Jody was involved, and her moving away fueled these rumours. But again, police are unable to link anything to her, and the rumours further see Jody feeling isolated and not ever wanting to return to the town of Corey's murder. Detectives then investigate Wendy Marshall. She presents as a very level-headed person, someone who is being realistic about her relationship with Corey. Although she wanted a future with him, she had a realization that he would never leave Jody, so she was content with how things were and didn't expect anything more from him. She also had a solid alibi for where she was that morning, and is quickly cleared as a suspect as well. A few theories are thrown around. Rumours that he had gambling and drug debts came trickling through, but investigation uncovers that these whispers didn't have any weight behind them. Although he was a recreational drug user, he hadn't owed anyone any money, and he wasn't in any sort of gambling trouble. Another theory suggested that a man by the name of Bob Morrison may have committed the murder. Bob was prone to violent outbursts, and horribly enough, murdered his wife before killing himself shortly after Corey's death. It is thought that possibly Bob had done the killing, as there was knowledge that his wife was sleeping with Corey. Again though, this lead falls flat. The investigation turns to Annette. She had always been cooperative with police. Even on the day of Corey's murder, she went straight to the sheriff when she learned of his death to give them any information that they might find useful. She would tell police that she is determined to find out who killed the man that she loved. Over the course of the investigation, police would never have to reach out to her, as she made contact with them on a regular basis. She'd ask if there were any updates, and seemed very passionate about Corey's murderer being brought to justice. They interview her and learn that she was in Iowa City for most of the day. Annette is given a polygraph test, which shows that she didn't display any signs of guilt. And although there was her suspicious timing of being at the house to drop that letter off, she is also cleared as a suspect. Approximately 400 interviews over a 6-month period of time are conducted, which lead nowhere, and hitting the end of the rope, the case goes cold. It's not until December of 2017, about 25 years later, that more information comes to the surface. A new person in the story is introduced, a woman by the name of Jessica Becker. In 2017, 35-year-old Jessica is working as an intensive care nurse at the local hospital. It's here that she meets a special agent for the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. He is at the hospital she works at, investigating an unrelated case, and the two begin to speak. Through this conversation, she learns that he specifically works on cold cases. Jessica says that she feels comfortable with him. She felt as though she could share knowledge, and wanted to talk about something that had played on her mind for many years. She didn't have any expectations as to what this information could lead to, but at the very least wanted to get it off her chest to somebody who might understand and have the potential to do something about it. She informs him that many years ago, when she was 9 years old, she had witnessed something very strange. At the time, 9-year-old Jessica was close friends with one of Jackie's daughters, and she would frequently visit the farmhouse for sleepovers, where she would spend time with Annette, who lived there. She knew Annette Cahill well, and said the woman was like a fun auntie who would take the girls to rent scary movies and buy them pizza. She also knew Corey, describing him as the fun older brother who lived down the road. During one of her sleepovers, in the fall of 1992, her and her friend decided to sneak downstairs in the middle of the night. She doesn't recall exactly why they had done this, but she does remember that they were up to something that they weren't supposed to be doing, so they were sneaking and being very quiet. She states, quote, "We heard some noise when we got down to the bottom of the steps, and then at that point, we heard Annette in the dining room. We saw her from the back side. I heard Annette crying and sobbing in the dining area. She made several statements that included, 'Corey, I never meant to hurt you. Corey, I'm so sorry. I never meant to kill you, Corey. I love you. Corey, I love you.' There were multiple black candles in the room that she was lighting as she was saying this." End quote. After witnessing this, Jessica and her friend rush back upstairs to avoid being caught. Later, she attempts to discuss what she had seen with her friend. Jackie's daughter would become defensive and say that Annette loved Corey. She was so very in love with him, and she was incredibly upset about his death. And that's all that she would say on the matter, not wanting to talk about it any further. Jessica says her memories are very clear on this because she knew Corey well. He was known around town, and he would always take time out to engage with her, giving her treats and playing games with her. The loss of him made a huge impact on her mind, and the memories surrounding his death and that time have forever stuck with her. At the time, Jessica says that she did tell her mother about what she saw, but her mother states that she was afraid to go to the police with this information. The reason being is that the sheriff was Annette's uncle, and who was going to believe a 9-year-old child? She thought that no one was going to listen to her. Jessica's mother speaks to her husband, now her ex-husband, regarding what their daughter had witnessed, but he became angered. He was a friend of Annette's and did not want to hear any of it. Jessica's mother also learned that her husband at the time had slept with Annette multiple times as well. The man was violent, which did lead to their eventual divorce, and he threatens her multiple times, saying that if she didn't keep her mouth shut, he would kill her. To further complicate matters, she was also afraid of Annette because of the sort of people that Annette was running with. She feared that saying anything could get a target on her back, so she didn't know what to do. She let that information that her daughter told her go without ever saying a word. With this new story being told, the case is reopened, and a detective re-interviews Annette, who says that she is excited to learn that the case is being looked into again. She eagerly would like to know what new information they have. This first interview is at Annette's house, and the detective records the audio from it. Here's an excerpt.
I was going to die not knowing.
Yeah.
And I accepted it.
Yeah.
Several years ago. It was, you have to accept it.
Yeah.
You can still have that little bit of hope, but it kills you to wait for it.
Yeah.
And it's still very, very painful.
Annette is then taken to the police station, where another interview is conducted. She claims that she can't stay there for very long, as she has a busy schedule with work, and this raises a red flag for the detective, who says usually when a suspect puts a time limit on an important interview, they generally have something to hide. The interview ends quickly on Annette's request, and another is booked in for the following day. When the time comes though, Annette cancels, which sees the detective go to her home unannounced to speak with her again. Through this second conversation at her house, Annette talks about the moment where Corey told her that he loves her, and it being such a bittersweet memory for her. She was overwhelmed with joy that he had said this, but she's also haunted by it, as that was the last time she would ever hear those words come from his mouth. It is here that Annette is informed that she is now the prime suspect, and this angers her. She firmly tells the detective, quote, I've tried to help you for 25 years to find who did this. I didn't kill Corey. I never hurt Corey. And I only ever wanted to make sure that whoever did kill him was caught." End quote. She promptly asks the detective to leave her house and informs him that she will be speaking to a lawyer. The detective remarks that through their conversation, she did say some things that struck him as odd. Things such as, Annette would say, "Go knock the shit out of somebody if you're that mad, but don't kill them." And, when her first husband cheated on her, she got a divorce. She didn't kill him. There also seemed to be holes in her memory. Holes such as, she did not recall stopping at Corey's house on the day of his murder to deliver that letter. She actually denied that she was ever there until she was confronted with her prior statements. Shortly after this, Annette is arrested, and as this happens, she tells the detective, "You don't know how wrong you are." In March of 2019, she goes to trial for first-degree murder. The trial is controversial, as there is not a lick of forensic evidence linking Annette to the crime. In the defense team's words, the state's entire argument is circumstantial, built around a more than 2 decades old child's memory. The state calls a number of people to the stand, where many details that you've heard throughout this video are told to the jury. Jody speaks about the moments when she found Corey's body.
I couldn't see his face. His face was turned towards the bed. But I could see the rest of him, and there was blood on the closet door, kind of thing.
Jessica's mother explains what her daughter had told her all those years ago, and why she never came forward with that information. Their star witness, Jessica Becker, is put onto the stand to tell the jury what she saw as a 9-year-old girl.
Can you describe what you saw and what you heard?
She was lighting black candles and sobbing and crying and apologizing to Corey. And she said, I'm so sorry, Corey. I never meant to hurt you. You know, I loved you, Corey. I never meant to kill you. And I'm so sorry for killing you, Corey.
And when you heard that, what did you think?
I was terrified. I was scared that she was going to turn around and see us. And I didn't know exactly what she was saying or why she would be talking like that. And I didn't know at that time that she'd had a relationship with Corey.
During closing statements, one of the things the state picks at is Annette's alibi. They argue that the only reason she came forward to say she had tried to deliver him a letter that day was because she knew a farmer had seen her as he drove past, and she needed a reason for being there.
Your sister-in-law Jackie's got some errands to run, and you might as well just go to Iowa City with Jackie for no real reason other than to ride around with her while she has errands to do. That doesn't make any sense. She's hurt, she's jealous, and she's angry. And hurt, jealousy, and anger can lead to murder.
The prosecutor even puts forward the idea that he believes after Corey and Annette had, in her own words, angry sex, that she drove to Wendy's house after Corey had left, and she saw his car parked there, further fueling her jealous rage and making her angry enough to be able to kill him with a baseball bat. The defense, on the other hand, say it's unbelievable that more investigation hadn't been done. There were holes everywhere. Annette had passed a polygraph. Her fingerprints weren't found on anything. But on the word of a 9-year-old, here we are in court. They say that all of the people who testified against Annette had an axe to grind for one reason or another. Affairs, arguments and tension, all in the background, making for a complicated situation where the people testifying against her did not like Annette at all and wanted to see her go away for this crime, whether she did it or not. The defense team says, quote, "A child's memory that old cannot be trusted. It could even have been a dream. The state basically has nothing. Nothing at all. This case is awash with reasonable doubt. They're grasping 26 years after the crime." End quote. After deliberating for 2 days, the jury is deadlocked. Initially, 11 wanted to acquit her, with 1 saying guilty. This resulted in a mistrial, and a second trial is scheduled for later in the year. During the time period between trials, Corey's mother bumps into an old friend and they begin discussing her son's death. This friend says that it's too bad that they didn't talk to my son, as he has information about the case. The son's name is Scott Payne, a person who was in Annette's circle of friends back in 1992. 2 days after the murder, he recalls being at Annette's house, drinking and getting high, when he notices Annette arrive in her vehicle. He says that she came speeding up the driveway and continued on around the back of the farmhouse, pulling up right next to a burn barrel. She frantically jumps out of the car, opens the trunk, and begins to pull out blood-stained clothing. The clothes were thrown into the barrel and set alight. He specifically remembers the clothes being soaked in blood, and states that he knew it was blood because he worked in a slaughterhouse, draining the blood from pigs, and would frequently have his very own clothes soaked in blood. He knew what that looked like. When asked why he didn't come forward with this information, he claims that at the time, and for a long time after, he was engaged in illegal substance use, and he tried to avoid the police as much as possible. The defense attempts to get his testimony excluded from trial on the reason that he did actually offer a statement in 1992 and never mentioned any of this before. Furthermore, at the time of the murder, he told police that someone by the name of Jeff Murdoch was a potential suspect. But now, in 2019, he doesn't remember anyone by that name and can't remember giving that information. The exclusion is denied, and Scott's testimony is allowed into the second trial. Court begins on September 9, 2019, and the defense argues that Scott Payne's testimony should be ignored, as not only was he a friend of Annette and her family, but he was also a known drug addict and heavy alcoholic. They say his story is not credible at all.
Nothing in the story that you heard from Scott Payne makes sense, and his story should be totally disregarded.
An interesting part of the second trial would see new information presented by the defense. At the time of Corey's death, grasped in his hand was a number of hairs. Most of it was cat hair, but 4 belonged to a human. This information was available for the state since 1996 and had been uncovered during the initial investigation. DNA testing at the time was not done because experts say the technology was not available for it to be accurately performed on those samples. The defense uses these hairs to argue that it proves Corey struggled with his attacker before he died. He had ripped some of their hairs out, and if that were the case, they say it couldn't have been Annette, as she was only 120 pounds and a non-athletic woman, and Corey was a 230-pound football player. He would have overpowered her easily. The state, on the other hand, fights back and uses this hair evidence to say that it crushes the defense's argument that the police performed a non-thorough investigation. Furthermore, new DNA testing was available in 2019, which wouldn't have been able to identify a suspect, but could at the least rule Annette out. The defense, having this evidence, could have easily performed this testing, but they chose not to. So at most, the state argues that all this hair evidence proves is that Corey and his fiancée didn't vacuum their floor too well. A few more details which work against Annette were presented by the state, which I unfortunately couldn't find too much information on. One of these was that another witness was presented who claims to have overheard Annette talking about killing Corey shortly after his murder. The prosecutor also highlights the fact that Jackie had admitted to the police that she possibly lied to protect Annette, and a recording of this was played for the jury.
Do you feel like you may have said a little to protect Annette?
I may have. I don't remember doing it, but I may have.
You said it was possible that you had said some things at Corey's murder to protect Annette, right?
No.
The trial comes to a close, and after 2 days and 16 hours of deliberation, the jury is once again deadlocked. The defense calls for another mistrial, but the judge urges the jury to try again once more and to reach a verdict in the morning if they can. The next day they were successful and had come to a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant Annette Cahill guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree.
Annette Cahill is found guilty of second-degree murder, and the 56-year-old mother of 3, grandmother of 4, is sentenced to 50 years in prison. It's at this point of the video I've moved away from research and court documents, and now speak from my own thoughts and opinions on this case. I do feel conflicted on this one. On one hand, I think that even though it was argued that she was much smaller than the football player Corey, if he was sleeping on his stomach, she could have easily incapacitated him with one swing of a metal baseball bat to the back of the head. It doesn't matter how strong one may be. An unexpected blow to the back of the head like that could do serious damage, even if the bat was wielded by a child. Annette was at the crime scene at the time of the murder. She had motive. And we have 3 witnesses claiming to have first-hand information of seeing highly suspicious behavior from her. But on the other hand, I imagine in a small town, Corey would have for sure made some enemies with his desire to sleep around to the extent he did. The lack of physical evidence linking Annette to the crime, in my opinion, could have provided the jury a significant amount of reasonable doubt. It's hard to say. Even though I read through the extensive court documents, it's not the same as being in the room. There's likely quite a lot of evidence that the jury heard, which I did not. And in saying that, who knows? There could have been something in there that managed to really quell that doubt. Something seemingly small that didn't make it into the documents or articles, but large enough to persuade the jury that Annette was indeed the person swinging that baseball bat. I hope that my thoughts here don't come across as insensitive toward Corey's fiancée Jody, but I just didn't read enough or learn enough about her regarding her involvement or lack thereof. I mean, her friends did state that she was quite upset by Corey fooling around with other women, but she would bottle this up and not show how much it hurt her to others. At the time of Corey's murder, Jody was pregnant with his child, and she gave birth in the summer following his death, and she also got married to one of Corey's best friends. When she moved away, she cut off all contact with Corey's parents, and they were unable to see their grandchild, something that is reported to have upset them greatly. Her reasoning for this, though, is that she wanted to keep her daughter away from what happened to Corey. On some level, I do understand why she might have done this, but on another, I can't help but to raise an eyebrow at this information. The moving away from town, the getting married to one of his best friends, it just seems a bit suspicious. I know she was cleared as a suspect, but could have she finally had enough after learning that she was pregnant? Might have she asked someone to kill Corey and then left town as soon as she was in the clear? It's complete speculation on my part, and like I said, there's really no information out there about Jody. Based on what I read about rumors like this of her involvement being something that hurt her deeply, I really don't want to carelessly add to that narrative without at least acknowledging that I don't know enough to throw my opinion on that side of the court. But I would like to point out it is something I thought about. This case I find interesting because of the non-black and white portrayal of both Corey and Annette. On one hand, both people are reported to be vibrant and loving characters, but on the other, their sexual exploits were so many that when I learned of another, I began to have thoughts such as, who in this town didn't they sleep with? Many people recall Annette being fun, joyful and bubbly. Even her daughter states that she is beside herself at this conviction, as her mother is the most gentle and kind soul out. She knits, bakes, quilts, and even works for the police department. She has always been troubled by his murderer not being found, and constantly made herself available whenever police wanted to discuss anything regarding the case. She says that she can't believe this has happened to her mother, and she does not belong in prison. This, on one account, sounds like the words from a daughter who had a great mother, but on the other hand, I learned things such as Annette would take her young daughter to the pub where Corey worked, and she would get her to play pool with people, whilst she went and hung out with Corey. I know that's no proof that she neglected her daughter or her needs, and it certainly doesn't prove murder, but it is something I thought about a few times in regards to where Annette's mind was at, and how much she was willing to pursue her relationship with Corey, how attached to him she might have been. Corey as well falls into that category of grey area regarding his behaviour, but no matter how much one might find his affairs reprehensible, the punishment is never death. You heard about his sexual deviancy, his drug use, betraying his fiancée over and over again. But on the other hand, We have reports of an incredible and energetic man, someone who lit the room up, never made any enemies, and only brought good vibes to those he engaged with. His loss was greatly felt by the community as a whole, and especially by his parents. He was their only son. They say that they miss him every day, and that family functions aren't the same without him. They say that the bar Corey once worked at, Winks, forever had a hole in it where he once stood.